Greetings everyone, I'm Hoodie Angel Brandon. Today we're discussing that Fire Emblem Direct. It's a shorter Direct, not as long as a standard Direct, but then again they're only talking about one game series, so it makes sense. Uh, and for for being a single series Direct, there was a lot more than I was expecting. Uh, but yeah, so they showed a fair number of stuff. Uh, Now, to preface this, I'm not a hardcore Fire Emblem fan. I got my start, like so many people, with Awakening and Fates. A lot of the more older players of this franchise don't really like those two games, but yeah. Uh, I think it's important that they made the game more accessible because before that, the series was kind of on its deathbed. Awakening was slated to be the last game in the series. Uh, and they made it more accessible, which led a lot more people to try it. And now it's one of the most represented series in Smash Bros. Uh, Much to a lot of people's annoyance, but I think it's a great series. And what they're doing here with what they showed today is, I think they're recognizing that the fandom is kind of divided into two camps. You've got the older players and the newer players, and they're trying to find a way to strike a balance with that, which I think is really important to avoid alienating either group. Uh, and so the first thing they showed in the direct was, I think, a great way of trying to draw those two groups together. And that was a remake of the Japan only game Fire Emblem Gaiden. Uh, and that's going to be put on the 3DS. Oddly enough, with all the Switch hype, they're still actually sticking to their word and having some dedicated 3DS titles coming up. Uh, but it looks like it's remade using the same kind of like engine as Fates and Awakening used. Uh, but so they're taking all the old classic characters and everything from and it was the second game, I think, in the series. Again, I'm not an expert. Don't shred me for getting some details wrong, please. Uh, but they're basically taking that old game, remaking it from the ground up with all the old characters and all the things that made that game unique, which I'm not super familiar with. But they were talking about, and they showed that it had more of a free roaming aspect, which is really cool. Uh, and in particular, they showed like the character walking through like a dungeon, and then they encountered an enemy, and they walked up to it, and then fade wipe into the standard grid-based battle screen that you see on all the Fire Emblem games and everything. And that looked really cool. It looks really fun. Uh, and hopefully they'll be able to strike a good balance between updating it and hopefully making it a little easier for people to jump in and get started with like the casual mode where it doesn't have the permadeath, and still keeping the soul of the original game intact for the original players, the hardcore vets. uh, and I know they'd be really annoyed with inclusion of something like the casual mode, because they don't like that. And I get why Fire Emblem was for the longest time defined by that permadeath aspect, but I think including the option, and options are generally not a bad thing to have. It's because if you don't want it, you just don't play with it. Simple as that. Uh, the option to have the permadeath off brought so many fans to the series, made it accessible to so many more people. Like myself, I didn't want to try the series because it just looked too hard. It looked too frustrating. I didn't want to sit there and invest 4 hours into a game, get wiped, and then all that progress is lost. I know it's appealing to some people, but I didn't feel interested in trying that. And now that I am more comfortable with the games, I've done 3 runs of each path on Fates through completion. I've logged like over 500 hours on Fates. Even though everyone says it's the bad one, I loved Fates. Awakening, I've done another 3 runs, probably a similar playtime. Now that I feel more comfortable with Fire Emblem, I'm interested in trying one of the playing more hardcore permadeath runs. Uh, so I think just having the option there reassures a lot of people and gets them more interested, which isn't a bad thing. And but I do hope they do manage to strike a good balance between keeping the soul of the original game intact and making it accessible for newer players. Uh, and that's going to be called Fire Emblem Echoes Shadows of Valentia, if I remember correctly. Uh, and someone pointed out on Reddit, on Fire Emblem Reddit, I went over just to check what people were talking about, how the veterans were reacting to the reveal, and it seemed mostly positive from what I quickly glanced over. Someone pointed out that maybe the Echoes thing will be like a subtitle for like a bunch of games, and they're basically just going to remake a bunch of the old Fire Emblems and bring them into the modern age, and just all the remakes will have echoes. And I think that would be really cool. A really cool nod to the echoes of the past, obviously, is what they're going for. Uh, so hopefully we'll see even more Fire Emblem games to come in the future, like remakes of the older games. Uh, but at the same time, they're also working on new stuff. Uh, they teased, and I mean teased, like very just gentle tease, like nothing there really. Uh, a new Fire Emblem game is in the works for 2018 on the Nintendo Switch. They are working on a Switch game for Fire Emblem, but we didn't get any real details other than, yeah, we're working on it. No name, no characters or plot elements, nothing really. They just said Fire Emblem for Switch, tentative title or working title, and that was that. But we know it's coming for 2018. Uh, and then next we got, and they were like, we have new footage of Fire Emblem Warriors. It was like 30 seconds of extra footage. It just showed Chrom uh, swinging a sword in typical warrior style, did a super looking attack, and that was that. No new characters or anything revealed, which kind of sucks, but I think that's something they can save for E3 and give it an expanded segment there. Uh, but yeah, so that's that. Nothing really there. Uh, but that's still coming for fall 2017. But actually, the interesting part about that was not only is that going to be a Switch game, but it's also going to be on the 3DS. So again, they're trying to capture that install base, but uh, I just don't know. I think that that's the kind of game that would help sell the Switch. Uh, Hyrule Warriors was one of the uh, better games on the Wii U, I think. Uh, it just had so much content. You got so much for what you paid for it. And I think that would be a game that would really help the Switch, especially since that's before we get to heavy hitters like Mario Odyssey. Uh, I'm not completely sold on the idea of a 3DS version, but it is what it is. Uh, so that's that. Uh, and then the other big thing was they showed the new Fire Emblem mobile game, Fire Emblem Heroes, and I got so excited. Like, well, first they showed just this guy who, like, coming out of a portal with this hood up. I thought he was like the fusion dance of Robin and the Masked Lumen from Bayonetta 2. uh, and he had a gun. He had a gun in a Fire Emblem game. I don't even know. But they showed off just some new characters for that game, and then they showed they're bringing back a ton of old characters. They showed Camilla, they showed Xander, they showed Lucina and Chrom, they showed Takumi and Lissa and Ryoma. They showed Hinoka was there. They showed all these characters from the newer games, and then they showed some characters from the older games that I don't recognize, obviously. Uh, but it just looks like they're bringing characters from like all across the series and putting them in this mobile game, and that's exciting because again, it's trying to draw the two sides of the fandom together. Uh, the thing about the mobile game is it looks fairly simple. It's a lot more simple than the basic Fire Emblem, I guess. Much smaller maps, like 6x8 grids, I think is what they said. Is the size for all the maps. The weapon triangle is they color coded it for your convenience. But I think this is great because it looks like it's free to play with microtransactions, which boo, but it is what it is. They still want to make some money off of it. Uh, but again, I think this is great because it's simple, but it still looks like it'll be fun, uh, and it'll get people interested. More people who are on the fence will be able to be like, this is a free to play game. I can try it. Oh, I like it. Let's try an actual Fire Emblem game. And then they can play it with permadeath off. And then they're like, oh, okay, I like this. And then they move on to the harder, they just progress up in difficulty, and it'll bring more people into the franchise. So I think it's great, and it looks really good. And then they have a thing to vote on characters to be in it. So I'm not, and they had everyone. Like I went to the Fates characters to lock in my vote for the first day. Like there's 13 days of voting. Uh, so I went to lock in my vote for the first day. I forgot my favorite character, Morgan. For some reason, I just forgot Morgan. So she's my day 2 vote, but I voted for male Corrin, even though I think Corrin has a pretty good shot already, and everyone else doesn't want Corrin. I voted for him, but you get like 13 days worth of votes anyway. Uh, so it's cool that you get to vote for your favorite characters, but that makes me wonder: are they not going to be able to put in all these characters, or maybe this is how they're going to decide which characters are going to be like rarer or something, like popularity. Uh, Hopefully, a good number of characters from each iteration of Fire Emblem can get in. Uh, but yeah, so and then the last thing was oh, that's coming February like 2nd, I think, actually, which is really soon, a lot sooner than I was expecting. Uh, and it looks mostly done, so uh, it looks solid as like just a pick up and play game. Uh, and easy point of entry for beginners. Uh, Most veterans probably won't be that uh, enthralled by it because it'll be so simple compared to the deeper games and everything. But uh, at the very least, it looks fun if it's like free to start and everything. Uh, and just see some old favorites that they might have in the game and everything. Uh, and then the last thing they did was showed 2 new amiibo for. Well, it wasn't the last thing, but it's the last thing I remembered. They showed 2 new amiibo for Shadows of Valentia, uh, of the like the protagonists in that Alm and Cecilia. I think I can't remember the girl's name, but that's going to be a 2-pack, which I don't like 2-packs, but uh, they looked really detailed. They looked really solid amiibo. Uh, of course, we're getting that before we even get our last Smash amiibo for Fire Emblem, so that sucks. Uh, but yeah, so that's a really rambly, unscripted thoughts on the Fire Emblem Direct. Overall, I think it's really exciting. It's great to see Nintendo show more love to this franchise that has always been kind of like just kind of off there. Like the most acknowledgement it's ever really gotten was Smash Bros, where now it's getting too much acknowledgement maybe. But it's just great to see it becoming more mainstream, even if they hopefully they can bring back some of the elements that made the older fans happy, strike a good balance. Uh, but overall, super hype, super exciting stuff. Uh, and so, yeah, thank you for watching as always. This is Brandon signing out.